Other news impacting Canada and particularly Alberta today. The world's top oil producers have agreed to cut production in an effort to boost falling oil prices. On Sunday, OPEC, Russia, and other oil-producing nations agreed to an unprecedented production cut of nearly 10 million barrels. That's a full one-tenth of the global supply. Oil prices have plummeted amid the COVID-19 pandemic, which has largely halted global travel and severely slowed down the manufacturing sector. It's been a bit of a perfect storm, unfortunately. For more, I want to bring in Alberta Premier Jason Kenney. Premier Kenney, appreciate your time today. First of all, your reaction to the deal that's been or the deal that's been reached to cut oil production by nearly 10 million barrels a day.
Well, it is some good news. As I've said over the past month, OPEC and Russia started this fire in global oil markets, and they had to put it out. This is an important step forward, but because of the collapse in demand and the surge in supply coming from OPEC Plus over the past several weeks, we've seen global inventories for oil almost reach tank tops. And so most projections are that we will continue to see very, very low prices for at least 18 months, which is why prices have not recovered following the announcement. Now, it is a sign of some hope that there is a way out of this incredibly deep trough, but it still means a period of extreme economic adversity for Alberta on top of the damage coming from the pandemic.
Let's focus on Albertans for the moment. How are they better off today than they were before this production cut was announced? I mean, in essence, it's really just leveling the playing field a little bit more, right?
Yeah. I would say perhaps this will avoid the absolute worst case scenario that we are hurtling toward, which would have been a total flooding of all inventories, by which I mean tanker farms and refineries and pipelines would have been absolutely jammed, so we would have had nowhere to send an incremental barrel of production. And in that worst case scenario, that could have forced shut-ins in some of the in situ oil sands projects that could have been very damaging in terms of their sustainability. So I hope that we've avoided that worst case scenario, but it still does mean that there will be a very depressed price for at least a year.
Okay. What are you hoping for from the federal government now, then, in terms of also helping the energy workers in your province who were struggling with job losses even before COVID-19 hit?
Right. So what we've been asking Ottawa to help with, first of all, is just a recognition that the largest subsector of the Canadian economy is the oil and gas sector. It is our largest export industry as a country. A third of Bay Street's books are tied up with the Canadian energy sector. So as goes Alberta Oil and Gas, so goes Bay Street. And finally, to recognize that there are about 800,000 jobs in Canada directly or indirectly related to this sector. One practical way they could help would be through an immediate support for oil well reclamation for incomplete wells. So there needs to be some work done to properly complete those and remediate them. That takes away environmental liability. It also puts thousands of high-paying blue-collar jobs out there. Secondly, we desperately need some credit backstop to assure liquidity for the oil and gas sector. Because they cannot raise capital, they've been burning through cash with basically negative prices, and we can't afford to lose dozens of companies because of this situation. So just like Canada provided a backstop for GM and Chrysler during the global financial crisis in 2008, we hope to see a similar kind of credit backstop, not a nationalization, but a credit backstop that gives them access to commercial rates of credit.
Okay. I've got just over a minute left to talk about something else that you announced over the weekend. You're going to be sharing your supply of PPE, donating masks, ventilators, other emergency supplies to provinces that are really hard hit, like Ontario, like BC. What led to that decision, and how is it that Alberta has an excess, a surplus?
A couple of things. We've been planning for this for a long time. We have a fantastic procurement team at our health service, our Department of Health, and they actually heard rumors about a pandemic in China back in December, and so they started surging orders, and we got ahead of the queue for PPE and ventilators, for example. Secondly, I think we did an extremely good job of aggressive testing and tracing and tracking of the initial cases, which means that we have a very low level of infections, hospitalizations, and ICU admissions. So you take those two things together, and we've got a lot of excess capacity. We've got major additional orders of supplies coming in. And so we felt we had a safe margin of error to share, some of that equipment, masks, gloves, visors, and ventilators, primarily with Quebec and Ontario, but also with British Columbia. We have weeks of run room based on our current burn rate. Some of those provinces have only days left of those critical supplies. And as proud Canadians, we're not just going to sit here on warehouses of stockpiled equipment watching other Canadians potentially going into a very dangerous period of the pandemic. So that's why we're sharing that equipment.
Alberta Premier Jason Kenney, appreciate your time tonight. Thank you.